Welcome. And we are live. How's it going, everyone, tonight? I already have a $5 super chat from Lee Guy. Thanks for the great work, alien scientist. Thank you. So, we're going to talk about, I'm going to give my technical synopsis first. And then I think we're going to go jump over to SETI. SETI is going to be doing a live stream. So, my name is Jeremy Riss, and I'm a graduate of BSU, Bridgewater State University. I have a bachelor's degree in physics with a minor in math, and I've been studying UAP from a academic and physics kind of background for about 17 years now. So I've done a lot of the collecting, organizing, summarizing, analyzing, synthesizing, and now I'm bringing all my actionable intelligence to the decision-making kind of people. And so I put this presentation together for SETI and the scientists there to give my sort of take on UAP and answer their question. Are UAPs worthy of scientific attention? So here we go. At SETI, we look for techno signatures from beyond. So most of the work that we do is signals intelligence collection and then sifting and sorting through that data. I used to have the screensaver back when CRTs used to be a thing and used to have screensavers. They had this SETI screensaver that was supposed to, help SETI sift through all the data by using up your computer. It would run on your computer and sift through all the data for any kind of signals that were interesting. And we mostly look for signals in the electromagnetic spectrum, but we didn't really see much of anything. And apparently we haven't, heard a heck of a whole lot, except for a few very discrete anomalous signals in the past, which, we won't get into that, but we're looking forward in the future. So building the next generation detectors using, I think the next generation detectors should realistically be using high frequency gravitational waves and squeezed light, similar to the squeezed light that's used in the laser interferometer at the LIGO detector, on this end of the spectrum. But if we get into, much higher frequency gravitational waves, we will, oh, sorry. I don't know why I went all the way to here and I can't go back. There it is. So beyond LIGO, I think we need to start looking for building gravitational wave detectors that look for gravitational anomalies, because this will also detect propulsion systems that we use, like the kind of warp drives that we'll talk about in a little bit here. There's this Yuri Milner guy. He's got this thing called Breakthrough Initiatives, and they want to build a giant laser pointer and shoot this laser out into space to signal aliens, because they don't think the aliens have already found us for some reason. We've been blowing off quite a bit of nukes, especially in the 60s. It got really crazy with all the nuclear testing since July 16th, 1945, with the first nuclear detonation at Trinity Test Site in Alamogordo, New Mexico at 5:29 in the morning. So, yeah, this is a pretty interesting graphic when you get into it. We've already sent off, if we're looking for these signals, we've already sent off the gamma waves and the radio frequency signals to announce our presence deep into the galaxy. And there's already some evidence that something somewhere has picked up on it and actually maybe come here and interfered with our nuclear devices. This has been declassified now. That there's been a number of incidents with ICBMs, as U.S. Air Force retired Lieutenant Robert Jacobs has testified to, and also the Minot, Malmstrom Air Force Base, and Rendlesham Forest, and a couple others. A lot of people will argue Rendlesham was an admitted hoax, or like that it was a hoax case or something, and some of these could have been hoaxes and stuff. But there's also a Russian case that's quite interesting, where ICBMs were shut down, and the U.S. was, and the Russians were almost put on the brink of nuclear war, and pretty interesting stuff. So there's this episode of the Star Trek I like to cite, which they talk about this thing called the Prime Directive, that normally they don't interfere or talk to. They watch this civilization from this invisible outpost, but this guy, one of the villagers, saw it when it was malfunctioning, and then explored it a little bit, and made contact with these space people, and then they brought them aboard the ship, and then and then explained things to them, and then parted ways. And it's kind of, this is like the ancient alien astronaut theory, that this Bronze Age civilization could have come into contact with aliens, and this would be the legend or the stories that they would write down, and get passed down through history, and become you know, their own religious scriptures and literature. So we have to take into account that invisibility technology is a real technology, and that invisible aliens might exist and be, already coming here and monitoring us, but not really trying to interfere directly, but maybe interfering a little bit where they feel like they should or need to, not just along in the right direction. There's some interesting evidence of that, but it's, again, should be held as just a possibility, because maybe it's not right. So we need to look at actionable intelligence. That's what I wanted to make this focused on: quantum radar, counter invisibility technology, and beyond. The Chinese have already developed a couple low frequency anti-stealth radar systems and platforms, which they've deployed in the field and are actively using, these to scan for things that are using invisibility cloaks and stuff. So this is a real, technology in the current age of warfare. We have these encounters that have gotten a lot of attention from the official, mainstream media side of this UAP narrative, which I don't think is of any. They haven't really produced much of scientific interest, because there's not much there in terms of actionable intelligence. And I don't think that, that's an accident, because, the government doesn't want to release much on actionable intelligence, because, as we can see, the Chinese have already, developed a new hypersonic vehicle mounted laser gun that they tested, that hypersonic missile, which uses this hypersonic technology. It shoots a laser in front of the missile to basically create a plasma, and the plasma then, creates this supercavitated vacuum state, which, evacuates all the air in front of it, which greatly reduces the air resistance in front of the craft. And then also this other plasma can be created at the back of this craft. This is other technology that was developed by this NASA scientist named Dr. Like Marabou. And there's also these patents by a guy named Salvatore Pace, that the U.S. Navy's been, exploring a lot of this really advanced technology for ionizing and doing high energy effects to the vacuum in front of spacecraft or aircraft or missiles, and this sort of thing. Seems to be the future. But there's also this idea of using lasers for, to create these similar effects just in air in general, and they can kind of create these grid-like patterns, and they can create some pretty weird effects and some pretty convincing spoofing technology, according to the head of the CIA's project manager out at Area 51, who was T.D. Barnes. I interviewed T.D. Barnes, and he seems to think that all these UAP encounters are actually just our own sophisticated spoofing technology. But I question how much he knows about the application of this sort of laser technology to these kind of systems and beyond. A lot of people get Area 51, which is in Nevada, confused with Roswell, which is in New Mexico. So Area 51 was built in 1955 at Paradise Ranch, and it's about a couple miles northwest of Las Vegas. And the Roswell, New Mexico crash site is actually not in Roswell. The crash site was northwest of Roswell, way out in this field, which is really remote and hard to get to. We visited the site. It was really hard to get there. It's actually in Corona, New Mexico. And people continue to dig up weird pieces of metal and stuff there to this day. It's unclear. There's been some debate because there's been a lot of fake pieces found, or just pieces that have been identified as other stuff. A lot of people say that the Army went out there and they swept up as much as they could, but there was still a lot left of it, so that they spread a lot of junk. They did a big junk dump there, and dumped a lot of old aircraft parts and other metals and debris there to kind of throw the debris site off. So a lot of that stuff gets found there, but people do dig up some weird artifacts. There was a lot of reports from numerous witnesses who were original witnesses to Roswell, including the Air Force Base intelligence officer Jesse Marcel. His son, Jesse Marcel Jr., allegedly brought the material home, showed it to his son. There's a clear, consistent from the path of the chain of witnesses, from the rancher who found it out on the ranch, to the girls and the friends of the rancher's son down the street who saw the material, to the sheriff's office, to the sheriff's daughters, to the people who everyone who handled the debris up until it was given to the base, and even people at Wright-Patterson who worked in the office at Wright-Patterson. June Crane reports that she handled a piece of this memory foil debris that was unlike anything substance that they had ever seen before. A lot of it's been confiscated, apparently, in subsequent years. As anytime there's been some interesting things, like they would have brought scientists, obviously, if it was an alien spacecraft there. John von Neumann published a paper on self-replicating spacecraft just 4 months after Roswell. So it's questionable whether it was something like that. There was this thing called ATIP and OSA and BASS that we know about. ATIP was this Lou Elizondo guy. He headed this project, apparently, for Bigelow Aerospace, and a couple of these the Defense Intelligence Agency, obviously, that they were authorized a lot of these DIRD documents, where you can find a lot of the good material, a lot of the really more interesting scientific materials. I have links to all this stuff in my presentation at the end if people want links to this kind of stuff. But the Adams Project is something I think should be focused on. It's not talked about much anymore, but it was sort of this thing that went by really fast, and they apparently there was a bunch of these pieces of Roswell debris still hanging around. This guy Art Bell had done a collection back in the day. He had a radio show on Coast to Coast and said, anyone who's got pieces of this debris, send them in to me. So he collected a whole bunch of this stuff. It's been featured on Metabunk and a couple other sites that they say it's just something else in this industrial slag or something like that. But somehow all these pieces that are of this alleged craft, all these pieces that have been out there, get collected by these organizations like the Adams Project, and they get given back to somehow they all wind up back in the hands of the military or these other organizations, which I'll talk about in a second. So Hal Puthoff, who is the science advisor for TTSA, said it was an unusual material, very complex, layered, unusual characteristics. He talked about, he cited another paper by a guy named Victor Podolsky who showed a mirror between two plates, a metamaterial between two mirrors, and said that this kind of waveguide with terahertz radiation, could produce this sort of near-field space-time warping, and some of this other technology that Tom DeLonge talked about on Joe Rogan. And then they've since kind of backpedaled on and haven't come forward with it. It went into it seems to go into these either back to the military or back to these small corporations, which is another interesting thing. I want to point out that there is classified research that we found that's being done and related to terahertz and ultra-fast photonics. This guy, Isaac Vincent Kemp, who is a Wright State University PhD, wrote his thesis paper on surface plasma on polaritons. He was taking some paperwork home with him. Apparently, the police went there looking for marijuana plants they were looking for a marijuana grow, and discovered the documents during the raid. And then they called the OSI and handed the case over to the Air Force OSI, who then showed up. I guess they did then drop the I don't know. I haven't heard much of the marijuana plant charges, if those were dropped or not. I couldn't find anything on those, but he was convicted of the classified information that he was taking home from his working at Air Force Research Laboratories and NASIC, which is the National Air Force National Air and Space Intelligence Center for the Air Force. So these are all, again, around Wright-Patterson, the same place that people allege that this Roswell debris was brought to. We have the right kind of research going on there. A lot of interesting connections that can be found and made there scientifically, and then perhaps some actionable intelligence in terms of how these things might work and building them. Bigelow Aerospace, who is the big contractor under ATIP, actually built a facility for UFO debris analysis, and they alleged that they released this, and then in the original article it said that they never received any debris from the government and that it was shut down. And then Bigelow Aerospace apparently went belly up and laid off all its employees. But there's rumors that all this stuff's not that it's really being operated by a very few number of employees, and it's all gone underground. And it's interesting that these corporations, these private entities, end up with these materials at the end of the day, and that SETI should be the ones who should have an organization for receiving such materials, and they should have an organization like this set up for themselves to handle this type of material and this type of analysis. It shouldn't keep ending up in the hands of these private quasi-governmental organizations. We need more official. I would take the debris myself, but I don't have the money and the funding to build these types of facilities and to do this type of research. But I'm sure that an organization like SETI could set this sort of thing up, or at least promote it. I would help promote it and get funding for it. There's been numerous cases of UFO metal artifacts from this September 1952 Denmark case. And also this Bob White artifact, which is very similar to this Bob White artifact. There's been a number of cases that these things have been reported, and they get sold for big money to somebody, and then they disappear and go in the hands of these corporations and what we call quasi-governmental organizations. An example would be SAIC, which is now Leidos Corporation, or Battelle, the Battelle Memorial Institute, and also InQtel, which is basically the CIA's R&D arm. And also, actually, the Federal Reserve System and the Federal Reserve Bank is a quasi-governmental organization. It's not actually federal. It's actually a private bank. It's not actually it's a federal bank. But anyways, Wright State apparently is another place we could look for evidence of this. There's allegations that the tunnel system here was built much earlier in post 1940s, and that these tunnels, which are big enough to drive a Jeep through, some of them, if we were to drill in the walls behind in some places, we might find evidence of older tunnels, and we could test the concrete for whether this was a facility where alien material was stored off base at Wright-Patterson, as was alleged by some of these people, that there was an underground facility sort of off base, and then they built a college on top of it, in 1966. We could tell whether that concrete was poured earlier than 66 or the mid-1960s when Alien Hall was first built. And this tunnel system still exists today. It's one of the features of Wright State University. But we have a number of Battelle scientists. Battelle's about 60 miles in Columbus, Ohio, and it's nearby. But Battelle did a lot of contract work in the post-1940s era on titanium alloys, and also analysis of titanium base alloys. And there's some allegations, there's been allegations from the guy who wrote the paper on this stuff and did this research that he handled pieces of this memory foil and was told to research it for Air Force Research Laboratories. Of course, 10 years later, maybe 15 years later, nitinol wire was first created. which has very similar properties to the memory metal properties to what this other material a lot of these people described. Then there was this guy from the Material Command named Philip Corso. There's a lot of maybe potential disinformation there, but he's at least alleging that the Roswell craft was real and that a lot of these technologies were sort of back engineered or brought out through research programs connected to labs with access to these materials. So this might be an interesting place to backtrack and look for evidence if we haven't seen it already. It's just nice to be aware of that. There's also the black world of UAP physics research and some scientists that you should be aware of. And also the APEC conference, which we hold in conference bi-weekly, where we try to get more scientists to come out of the woodwork or just join the conversation and move that forward. And this sort of derived from some of these older conferences, which some of them you can't even find records of anymore. But John Wheeler and Bryce Dewitt and his wife Cecil Dewitt worked for Battelle and Rand Corporation think tanks during the late maybe 40s, 50s, and 60s, and would have been the type of people who in fact, there's a lot of evidence that they were the people that were consulted to try to figure this stuff out, and it's reflected in the work that they did with, Wheeler's It from Bit and his work with Bryce Dewitt on the Wheeler-Dewitt equation and quantum non-locality. These more generalized attempts to unify relativity and quantum mechanics. So really interesting stuff. Then there's these guys, Gary Nolan, who has a lab, and Jack Valet, who has been collecting samples on his own for quite a while, and has a lot of these samples that are quite interesting. And he's got them saved, and they've been analyzing them and found that they have these isotopic ratios. The ratios of all these isotopic versions of the elements are off the charts. So he argues that they're building with way more building blocks than our normal chemists are building with only this many building blocks, because we don't consider all these nuclear isotopes all the time. But this is kind of what they're building with on a whole nother scale of precision, what they can get with this the added mass and what that does to the spin of these particles and stuff, and all these other weird interactions and things that happen in certain parts in the lattice, like the hafnium and stuff like that. But anyways, another place that we might consider looking, if not into space and looking into deep space for evidence of aliens, is deep time. And we'll talk about Carbonado diamonds, and Carbonado diamonds are a good place to look because they have an extrasolar origin according to their isotopic ratios, and they kind of arrived on Earth just before photosynthetic life emerged. And the carbon dating, that's what it suggests. So they could have been carriers for the photosynthetic life, or the early carriers of these types of Precambrian, bacteriums or self-replicating particles and stuff. So Carbonado diamonds are definitely something that should they have unknown origin. There's an extraterrestrial hypothesis for them, and might be a good place to look. We've done some studies and found some interesting things in them. Definitely something worth looking at. Also, gene drives, and looking into genomes of green blue algae, ginkgo biloba, and other ancient species for signs of artificial modification, like databases and gene drives, might be worthwhile. While we're tinkering with genetic viruses and all the other DNAs, why don't we look for gene drives and some of these ancient molecules and stuff. So definitely search deep time for out of place fossilized technologies, like artifacts and stuff like that, and be more open to that kind of stuff, and have a lab somewhere for analyzing those types of artifacts and things as well. So my main takeaway points would be We can use quantum radar and high frequency gravitational wave squeezed light detectors to see invisible aliens by the signs of their cloaking and propulsion mechanisms. SETI needs to create a crash recovery and debris collection and analysis team and program. And scientists should probably read up on the state-of-the-art spoofing and hypersonic directed energy propulsion technology, the Lake Marabou and the Lightcraft stuff, as well as some of the other stuff in the APEC conference, which might be interesting. And study up on polarizable vacuum approach to special relativity, the Bernard Hayes' theoretical work for Lockheed Martin on the zero-point field and inertia, and Jack Sarfati's work on general relativity and warp drives via the Froelich condensates, etc. Because that's all really scientifically interesting work that's being done in the field. And yes, some UAP info is worthy of scientific inquiry. And for more on that and to keep up with me and what I do, alienscientist.com and altpropulsion.com are my websites. And yeah, there you have it. Any questions? Let's I gotta find this now. Hold up. All right, 1 second. I gotta email this to myself. I'm gonna play one thing for you guys real quick. Well, this starts. This is Shirley Wright. Okay, guys. And Shirley Wright, Dr. Shirley Wright was an aide. She held 2 PhDs, one in chemistry and one in physical sciences. And she was an aide for Einstein. And apparently she was recorded saying this, and this is quite interesting. I just heard this for the first time today.
All I recall is several people using the word Roswell, and that must be where the crash occurred then, and then they brought them to the other place. It looked like at an airport facility where there was like a rather good-sized building, a hangar, where they had the spaceship and that where they had the bodies.
Was it an intact ship?
No, it was badly damaged.
Was there anything written on the ship?
No, not anything I saw. No, not by the time I saw it.
Can you describe what it looked like? Did you touch these?
Yeah, they didn't let me do that, but the other people were permitted to do that because they were very curious about knowing what kind of materials they were. The body of the ship was the body of the ship was what I would call today rather a reflective material, but when you looked at it and you were close to it, it was rather dull. So it had to be energetically reflective or translucent or glowing. And it was disc shaped, and it was not too high. It was sort of concave, you know.
How big was it?
Oh, gee, let me see. It was, I'm very bad at large room, and it was easily 1/4 the size of the room it was in.
Were you able to go inside?
No, I wanted to, but the others did go inside. Yeah, they went inside. I was not permitted to do that. Not being one of the upper echelon. I was just one of the gophers, you know, going for this, going for that. You know, I was nobody. But they went inside. They also wanted to see the method of propulsion. They were interested to see. They wanted to see if they had any other types of control devices or communication devices, or what kind of even things they had for the journey. In other words, if they had come such a long distance, how were they able to do that, and so forth. You know, what you and I would call food or respiratory gases. You know, what did they use? They were very interested in identifying that.
Did it look like in?
Some of them told me, yes, and it's very much,
Yeah, could you imagine
oddly,
if this
like
is
a lot of
true?
science fiction movies today. A lot of equipment, very trim, all along the perimeter. Things that would come up from the floor automatically, pods that would come out, things like that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the beings and communicated empathic? What kind of information was given? Did they ask you anything, and did you ask them anything?
It was both ways. We asked them several questions, and they asked us several questions. Not myself
Recording in progress.
individually, or me particularly, but the people I was with. They wanted to know. They wanted to know how long we lived. They wanted to know if there were some conditions that terminated what we call, quote unquote, our life. In other words, what you and I would consider diseases or stresses on our body
Dateline,
that terminate
Roswell,
our life.
New Mexico,
Uh,
June, July
they
1947. Did a flying disc crash land on the Roswell Ranch in New Mexico back in the summer of 1947? Or was it a weather balloon, as the US Army subsequently reported? Was there a biological alien on board the doomed craft? And has all this been the subject of a massive government cover-up? From Roswell to present day, the subject of UFOs, now known as UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, have captured headlines and the imagination of people from all over the world. The scientific community remains largely skeptical, and questions abound. Why and how, for example, would the government cover up perhaps the most significant discovery in the history of humankind? Why, if they lost a spacecraft and one of their citizens, would we have not heard from the alien civilization in question, perhaps trying to retrieve their property? And how is it that an alien civilization capable of crossing the unfathomable distances of interstellar space could have the technology to perform that feat and yet not have the ability to navigate our skies without crashing? And why is it that in an era of billions of high-resolution cell phones taking billions of photographs every day, does photographic evidence of UAPs remain as rare and in poor quality as images dating back 50 or more years ago? Tonight, on a particularly intriguing edition of SETI Talks, we're going to explore these questions and more with two very special guests who may help shed some scientific light on this perplexing topic. I do think it's fair to say that to date, neither the federal government nor the scientific community have conducted any actual research on the topic of UAPs. And by research, I mean conducting observational or other detection experiments specifically designed to detect, image, characterize, and otherwise understand the phenomena that have been so widely reported by accidental observation, but never verified. As the CEO of the SETI Institute, I personally advocate for such an undertaking, and we do have the technology to help. All we need is funding. And now, of course, you may have heard that Harvard's Avi Loeb is famously getting at least one such experiment underway. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and SETI Institute friends the world over. Thanks for joining us for tonight's SETI Talk, UAPs. Are they worth scientific attention? For our regular SETI Talk attendees and new guests alike, let me remind you that if you're watching tonight on Zoom, you can post questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to at least some of those questions at the end of the panel discussion, hopefully as many as we possibly can. I also want to remind you that we'd love to know where you're joining us from, as always, so please use the chat function to tell us where you are. Our host and moderator for tonight's discussion is the Institute's very own Molly Bentley, who is co-host and executive producer of our Big Picture Science podcast and radio program. Before I turn the podium over to Molly, I want to let you know that SETI Talks is a production of the SETI Institute in Mountain View, California, and is made possible by the generous support of people like you. You can learn how to get involved in our mission, support our work, or sign up for newsletters online at SETI.org. Tonight's talk is sponsored by Carl Cruz. Carl grew up in Puerto Rico and often visited the Arecibo Observatory there in visits that inspired his lifelong curiosity about space and what's out there. Although growing up in Puerto Rico, he attended college and graduate school in the US for degrees from Princeton, NYU, and Stanford University. And just to continue his global exploration, he now lives in Berlin, Germany. Carl's been a follower and supporter of the SETI Institute since taking a SETI course with Seth Shostak back in the 1990s. Unfortunately, Carl can't join us tonight from Berlin, but we thank him for making the program possible. And with that, let me toss the saucer over to Molly to launch tonight's program. Molly?
Thanks, Bill. Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to begin by providing some additional context for tonight's conversation to further what Bill said. Science fiction seemed to become reality at the end of 2017 when the New York Times reported that a government had a secret UFO program. Now, it wasn't the first government UFO investigation. There had been a few in the 50s and in the 60s. And by the time that the public had heard about this one, it had been defunct for about 5 years. But the fact that the government did have a modern UFO program blew mental gaskets. Warp speed ahead. Now we're at 2020. The Department of Defense officially releases 3 Navy videos from its once classified program. The videos appear to show objects zipping through the sky, even rotating against the wind. And according to some Navy pilots, the objects are maneuvering in a way that no known aircraft can. And it was this year, in 2020, that we learned that the government had created a new program to investigate these objects, but replaced the term UFO, unidentified flying object, with UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena. In June of this year, the UAP task force released its preliminary report on the mysterious objects seen by military pilots. Of the 144 sightings, the Pentagon was able to explain one of them. It was a balloon. It could not identify the other 143 puzzling phenomena. Were they also balloons? What about birds or domestic or foreign aircraft? It could be camera errata or visitors from outer space. Our guests tonight would like to know that they say that UAPs have not generated the kind of scientific interest that they deserve. Ravi Koparapu is a planetary scientist and an astrophysicist at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. His studies include the potential habitability of Earth-like planets around other stars and atmospheric modeling using data from the Kepler Space Telescope. Welcome, Ravi.
Thank you, Molly.
Jacob Hawk Misra is a SETI astronomer and a senior research investigator at the Blue Marble Space Institute of Science. Among other things, he studies planetary habitability, atmospheric dynamics, and environmental ethics, and the big questions about the distribution and future of life in the universe. Together, they wrote an article in Scientific American, and welcome, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Moving on with the conversation. We're very happy that you are with us. Together, Jacob and Ravi wrote an article in Scientific American in 2020 and an op-ed in the Washington Post this year, making the case that UAPs are legitimate subjects for scientific study. So let's find out why they think so. Jacob, I'm going to start with you. The behavior of these objects is puzzling, to say the least. Do any of the objects in these videos move in a way that make you say, holy cow, how could anything on Earth move like that? Just so we can have an image in our minds as we proceed with this conversation. Could you select one of the objects in one of the videos and describe why its movement is so hard to explain?
Sure. Yeah, this is why these videos are so interesting. And so in 2004, it was the USS Nimitz and encountered several objects, and that's some of what's captured in these videos. And so what's puzzling about these objects is their rapid movement. You see things like an object descending from 28,000 feet to sea level in less than a second. And so, if you try to estimate the acceleration on these kind of objects, you get anywhere from hundreds to thousands of times the force of gravity, which would, not even our most trained pilots wouldn't be able to survive this. And the amount of energy required to have that kind of acceleration is just beyond the kind of technology that we have today. So just based on that alone, this is something if it's not violating the laws of physics, it's using physics in ways we don't know how to do yet.
And these are very short videos, though, so we only get snippets of the behavior of these objects.
There's short videos, there's some radar data, there's some eyewitness accounts. We'll get into the conversation more, but there's not enough data to say what they are yet. But there's enough snippets of data to make me say, hey, this is really interesting, and whatever it is, this is something about physics that we don't really understand yet.
Okay, so that's making the case for why maybe we should study them. But Ravi, how do we know that these are physical objects and not just quirks of the instruments? I mean, these are really sophisticated instruments, and they're highly, they're designed for precise calculations on these aircraft. How do we know that what we're seeing are not just quirks of the instruments?
Right. I'm going to address this with 2 points. If we are talking about the recent Navy incidents, it is certainly possible that some of these are instrumental artifacts. The DNI report does mention that some of them could be the result of sensor errors and probably require additional rigorous analysis. But what we have seen in the public, like
you know what, Ravi, I'm going to interrupt for a minute. I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm going to suggest maybe take off your let's just go, maybe or take it off. Unplug it from the computer. Let's try that.
You hear me now?
Yes. Okay, let's take that from the top. So you said, so my question was, how do we know that these aren't just errata in the instrumentation?
Right. So what I was saying is that if we really are talking about the recent Navy incidents, and it's certainly possible that these are instrumental artifacts, the DNI report, of course, does mention that there could be sensor errors and required some more study and analysis. Like you said, what we have seen is a snippet of data. However, these UAP are not a single type of object to explain away that they are instrumental artifacts. Their appearances and behaviors indicate multiple types of UAPs, so may require different explanation. There is even more fundamental issue here. We are now caught up with this relatively recent news, UAP news. This phenomenon is not a new thing. It has been going on for decades, and if, Professor James McDonald in his Science in Default document has written about 4 cases. Are all the events in the past and around the world that's happening could be explained away by instrumental issues? I mean, while the recent events got understandably highlighted the UAP discussion, we should remember the history. History is important to give us a context so that we can understand our own biases.
Okay, well, pause it before we get to too much of the history, but now you've made the case that while some of them may be glitches in the instruments, these seem to be physical objects. They seem to be, the events seem to be happening around the world. The two of you would like to study them more rigorously, but the objects have already been studied by the Pentagon. So for both of you, what more do you hope to learn, and what can scientists do, and the team of scientists that you would like to pull together, what can they do that hasn't already been done?
Well, I would like to know what they are. And this is the point we made in our Washington Post article, is that a lot of times these conversations focus on, they focus on what are they, and we want to answer that question now. And I want to answer that question, but the real question we have to ask first is, how can we understand what they are? And there's a large percentage of these objects that seem to be objects in the sense that they appear on radar. There might be infrared camera observations. There might be eyewitness sightings. So multiple wavelengths, multiple pieces of data indicating that it's an object. And a larger fraction of these are unexplained than we would usually accept in any other field of science.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there's that much to be explained, do they all fall in the categories of birds or airplanes or weather balloons? If that's the case, we should understand why we have such a hard time identifying those things.
Well, let's be clear though, because I think there's no dispute that these objects are truly puzzling. But what is it that scientists could do that the Pentagon didn't already do? Because they went through all of this, they could answer some of them, they couldn't answer, they couldn't identify what some of the other objects were. What is it that your team, and you've been calling for an interdisciplinary team of scientists to study them, what could they do that the government wasn't able to do?
Well, we don't have access to the government data. There's been very little data that's been declassified. There's various reasons for that. I would love for data to be declassified, but you probably have to reveal information about your instrument in order to make sense of the data. That instrument is probably very secret, and maybe it's good that we're not declassifying that, but for better or for worse, we don't have access. I don't know what the Pentagon has done. They may have some secret report that will never be released. I'm not an insider at all. All I know is that there's been enough information coming from the US government and then elsewhere beyond the US government to say that multiple governments and agencies and non-government actors all take this seriously and find observations. But what you would need if you want to get past this classified wall of data is to take your own independent data. You need to take data at multiple wavelengths, at infrared, take radio data, take optical, record with cameras. You can use some of the global center networks that are already in place by agencies like NASA and others where the data is publicly disclosed, and then supplement that with anything that you can build if there's funding available to really take continuous measurements, not just sample the sky once per day, but you need to have continuous measurements of as much of the sky as you can, which fundamentally is similar to the problem SETI does. It's just you're looking at a different distance. Instead of trying to look far away for radio signals at the whole sky all the time, you want to look a little bit closer in, but still the whole sky at all the time, ideally, if you really want to know what's there.
And we'll come back to some of the methods that you may be using, but you've given us enough, a nice outline of how you might do that. But the key here is that you want to do independent investigation. So this isn't about trying to get access to the UAP task force report or look at it more carefully, or try to get the Pentagon to give you information that they're not giving up, or even to go back to those initial videos. It sounds like you're talking about something where you gather the data on your own as an independent body of scientists. Is that right? And
I would love to see what the Pentagon has, but I don't think we're going to get it, and I don't think it's worth barking up that tree. And Ravi can talk more about the historical cases. We should learn from what has been done, because there is a lot of just in terms of the methods and the questions that you ask, but we don't have data from those old cases either. We don't have enough data to be able to really do any kind of assessment. So we need to collect new data.
Well, Ravi's been talking about the history. Can you give us just an overview of how, if this is what you mean, how the past historical, investigations, and it could be anything from the Condon report to the government projects of Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book. I believe those were the names shifted as time went on. Is that what you mean, Ravi? Is like, look at how they did it in the past and get some guidance from those earlier investigations?
Right. So there were some reports written in the last 50 years, 50 years ago. And I would say whatever the report's conclusions are, there was a scientific investigation, some sort of a scientific investigation.
Are you talking about the Condon report in the 60s, late 60s?
Right. Not just the Condon report. I'm also talking about the Condon report was the result and was the one that came out in the late 60s that, essentially said maybe it's not, UFOs are not scientifically what important to investigate or something like that. But I would say that the lesson that we want to learn is there was actually something done about it. And it was okay to talk about a scientific investigation, to do research on these UAPs. James McDonald disagreed with some of the results from the Condon report and tried to assess some of the cases that were discussed in the Condon report itself. And so you see, that kind of debate is needed. We can't just say that, let's not study them because whatever, they are instrumental artifacts. But this is the way science is done. Let's have a discussion on the science, how it is done, and then we will go ahead and see how, like Jacob is saying, collect the data and to see how and what we learn about them.
Now, you brought up something that I think is what's underpinning your argument for why it's important to study these. And that has to do with the reason why we haven't studied these. So you said that there was a period of time when we were studying them and that wasn't a problem. But now there's a taboo around it. And at least that's my understanding from what you've written. I wonder if the two of you could address why studying this sort of phenomena of UFOs or UAPs has been considered taboo among scientists. And when did that happen? Because as you said, maybe 50 years ago, it wasn't taboo.
I'll let Jacob answer first, and then I'll have a follow-up with that.
Okay, well, I mean, I think the obvious answer is it's guilt by association. When you say UFO, people think of saucers and little green men and alien abductions and everything else. And very quickly, I'll tell you, I went, a couple years ago before the pandemic to the Library of Congress. I went through Carl Sagan's files there, and he had several files on UFOs. Mostly it was letters, about half of his letters people had written him. But then he collected, various pieces of, writing that interested him. And there were, crop circles were in there, because at the time we didn't even know the answer to were crop circles a hoax or not, or what caused that. And so just being open-minded enough to look at all that, I thought it was interesting that Sagan was just collecting all that data. And so the fact that all of those topics are under, even in Carl Sagan's file folders, are all under UFO, that makes it really difficult to then focus on a very narrow set of anomalous objects in the sky that may sometimes be confused for airplanes or birds or weather balloons, but has, to decouple it from the other sort of paranormal other topics, and maybe some topics that are even worthy of study, but have nothing to do with objects that are in the sky. And I think that's really the problem is if you say UFOs, it assumes all of this pseudoscientific paranormal content, and a lot of scientists just would rather distance themselves from that rather than sort of implicate themselves in pseudoscience.
And we should be clear that the crop circle mystery was cleared up, and the guys came forward. And my colleague Seth Shostak always liked to say, why was it that those crop circles were always made like after 5 p.m. on Friday and on the weekend? But anyway, crop circles is not a mystery. What might be flying around our skies is, and in fact, the taboo around it is one of the reasons why the government changed the program from UFO study to UAP, because what they said was that if you could reduce the stigma around it, you might get pilots coming forward more often and just admitting to what they saw. So the stigma also extends to the community of pilots as well. On the idea that this might be something else other than a craft, and I think that that's really important going into your investigations. Both of you have said going into this investigation doesn't mean that you are looking for evidence of alien craft, and you want to decouple that. And Robbie, you compare the study of UAPs to the initial study by scientists of astronomical phenomena like gamma ray bursts or supernovae or gravitational waves. They seem very different from what we're seeing in our skies, but what's the connection there?
Oh, I was talking about the transient phenomena and the transient nature of these astronomical phenomena and how scientists study them. And so there is a precedent about how we do that, how with what kind of instruments, and how we collaborate, share data, collect new data, publish, the scientific process. So that is the context that I was talking about. How do we study transient phenomena? The UAPs are transient. Some of them, many of them, are transient phenomena themselves. And so,
just to be clear, when you say that you called for this, this is something you called for in some of your writing, I think in the Washington Post or the Scientific American article. That's what you mean.
That's right.
And transient, they're just very brief. And also some of these UAPs, they don't repeat. So you get one shot, right? Is that one of the problems?
Right, but it's a class of phenomena that we need to observe, right? So just like a gamma ray burst or a supernova, so we know that it is a gamma ray burst, or we know the nature of the astrophysical nature of these transient phenomena because we studied them. If I just see something, a bright shiny object in the sky, if an astronomer, and then I try not to share the data, or I just try not to study it, but then make it a taboo to study that phenomena, we will never progress. We will never understand it. Maybe when we study these UAPs, all UAPs may turn out to be mundane. Totally fine, totally cool. But then let's do a scientific process to understand them, and so that we will know what they are rather than a speculation.
Will you be disappointed if they're all balloons?
I have no reason. No, not at all. we have,
What do you say?
our approach is agnostic, right? So we should be open to everything. If it's a balloon, that's great. Fine. It's a strange kind of balloon, then I'll know something.
Okay, well, the two of you are calling for an interdisciplinary team, which means scientists from all different kinds of disciplines. What sort of disciplines do you want to include in this team?
So in this case, from what we have learned, at least the ones that we have seen, these appear to be mostly in the Earth atmosphere, atmospheric phenomena. So we should have, aerospace and aviation related people, experts in this. We need probably meteorologists. Jacob is, of course, a meteorologist and has a degree in meteorology. We should have physical scientists to understand what is going on. So at least these disciplines would be good to start with. I wouldn't say this is the comprehensive list, but these would be these 3 or 4 expertise would be really useful to start working on.
And this would be around the world, or that doesn't matter?
I mean, if an expert is an expert. So if we want to
Okay. Well, could the two of you give us a real sense of what these studies would look like? I mean, Jacob gave an overview, but are we talking about scientists for a discrete period of time, setting up observation stands, or just pouring through data, or how would you collect the information that you want to collect? For one, like you said, these phenomena are transient. So do you set up telescopes or infrared video or radar data collecting sites and just wait? Or what would this look like?
So something like that, I would say, and probably some fast tracking cameras, because when we were talking about transient phenomena as well, and different spectral wavelengths, different wavelengths. Some of them could be optical infrared, maybe in the UV, maybe in the long far infrared, and even in the radio would be good. I would.
Will you tell us why? Will you just tell us why it's so important to get all those different wavelengths?
Right. So radar, I would probably, maybe because we can potentially obtain some sort of a speed or the range for these some of these objects. Infrared, because to see if they are emitting any, thermal radiation, heat. Optical, just because to see how they operate in the visual band, and what do we see in the visual band.
Right, that's in the visual wavelength.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
What we're using right now.
Correct.
Yeah, and then you said something fast tracking. Did you say fast tracking radar, or fast tracking
cameras? I would say
cameras. Why are those important?
Well, because these are transient, right, phenomena. I don't know. This goes into a little bit more detail. I'll probably have to talk to experts on this one. If we have, this is the problem, right? To know how fast we want to track them, we need to start with something, and then see if we can track any of these objects. Maybe initially we may be successful with some of the some objects to see how fast we will be. They are going. Maybe then we can fine tune, refine our instruments. So this is how the process has to start. We have to start at some place.
Right. And Jacob, would these be ground-based observations, or will you try to get, as Ravi said, this is in the atmosphere, upper atmosphere? How will you get up there to watch?
Right. I mean, ultimately it's dependent on, is there funding available and how much funding is available. So if you had unlimited funding, you would have a network of space-based monitors. But, realistically, funding is limited. You'd have a ground-based network with global coverage to the extent that you could. One thing in the UAP task force report that, I'm not putting like tons of faith in the government, but the government does say in the report that they're calling for more intergovernmental cooperation to share data. to try to identify these. And so that kind of model is, we can pull from data that NASA satellites are taking, for example, and other public government and other non-US government sources of data that are available for anyone, and then collect our own data. And you're going to have some hire some postdocs or something to sit and pour through this data. And I mean,
it's always the postdocs. It's always
there might be something that could be learned right now without collecting too much more additional data, but really just carefully comparing data from multiple data sets that don't always get compared. So that might be another place to start while we're trying to collect new data.
And have you had scientists contact you and say, we want to be a part of this if we can just get the the funding and the organization together? They answered your call, in other words?
I mean, I don't know that there's funding available that we've seen. There's certainly scientists who have contacted us and say they're interested in talking about this. They agree that there shouldn't be a taboo, and I think that's probably been the most encouraging result of the U.S. government taking a formal position on this, is that's helped to break down the taboo. There's still not mainstream scientific investigation of UAP, but we're here talking to you. I'm not worried about my career, what's going to happen tomorrow. 10 years ago, that might not have been the case. It might have been riskier for me and Ravi to be having this conversation, which I don't like that. I think you should be able to talk about anything. As scientists, it should all be open if you're being honest with how you're asking the questions. So
it's not just taboo, it's taboo with consequences. So it's one thing.
It has been for some people. Yeah.
I see. These objects, this idea of providing some kind of global network in your wish list, and you should present your wish list. It's always good to hear if there were no restrictions, what anyone would want. But if you had to narrow it a little bit, these objects are often seen by pilots, and it's over water, it's over often military compounds and around airports. Does that guide you? In other words, is there anything about where the phenomena are spotted that would inform how you study them?
I would go ahead, Jacob. You want to?
I'll just briefly. I mean, I think commercial pilots would be one place to go because it's not connected to the military at all. And so there's been some sightings by commercial pilots. Maybe look at those a little bit. I don't know if there's patterns that would be even reasonable to predict. I have a hard time believing, but in any case, you could do something with, commercial pilots or even just private planes flying at high altitudes is, one place you could start.
I agree. I think maybe some of the places where there have been reported UAP events maybe would be a good start and see or talk to the people who have been involved in this before and see if we can have these instruments near those places. Would be a good place to start.
Did I characterize that right? That often it is over military compounds and over water? I
would say that's an observational bias because that's where the reports are coming from. That doesn't mean that's the only place they are going to be there.
Okay, excellent point. Just to follow up on the pilots, and this is just a curiosity of mine, and I don't know if you've talked to any pilots, but most of these reports, when they are reports from Navy pilots or pilots, they're obviously reporting what they don't understand. But has anyone gotten accounts directly from pilots who do know what they're seeing, but maybe initially they didn't know what they were seeing? They didn't know what they were seeing at first. Then they figured it out. But of course, they would never report that. That would never become an incident, be an incident report. Has anyone, just curious, has anyone talked to pilots who have said, oh yeah, I saw something like that, and then I figured it out, it was a balloon or whatever it would be?
So
did I stump you?
No.
Oh, no.
Did anyone, as in either one of us, or
no? But I'm not asking if one of you have, but I just wonder if that's also a way of going, is not just what's been reported, but maybe what hasn't been reported or what has been resolved. It's just something I was thinking about. when we're talking about what pilots have seen?
Well, I mean, that's part of what you would do in investigation, especially if you were trying to incorporate eyewitness accounts. You can't base, it's very dubious to base an entire investigation on eyewitness accounts. But if you have radar and you have video and then you have eyewitness accounts, then you want to talk to those people, and there's methods for how you do oral interviews and understanding how the story changes based on the first sighting and the retellings of that story. So yeah, presumably that would come out if there was a report that a pilot saw a UAP and it got recorded, and then you're following up on this investigation later. You would interview the pilot, and if they now know what it is, then a good investigation would have interviewed the pilot to make sure they get that story.
So this sounds like what you're asking for is something that is quite layered. So you're using the instruments to collect the data, but then also talk to the eyewitnesses and then try to bring it all together to get a comprehensive understanding.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you would have so many sensors that you wouldn't even need to talk to anybody, just the way we do exoplanets, to remove any ambiguity. But at least to start with, if these are transient events and we don't even know exactly where to search, we have limited resources, you probably have to at least, take that into account. You don't have to believe everything everybody says, but there's, Robert, you're talking about who needs to be involved in this. You need social scientists involved, people who understand how to conduct interviews and how to take oral histories and the methodology involved in that.
So I'd like to say something over here. So yes, social scientists are involved in that, probably because I guess, Jacob, you mean because of the eyewitness accounts. Is that
how to do the interviews? Yes.
Yes.
That's an art, just like we know how to run, experiments and telescopes. Just how do you do an interview is a skill that I'm not trained in.
Right. So, but for an actual scientific investigation, data, and instrumental data, let me be more clear on that. And instrumental data is the one that we need to make some progress on understanding these UAPs. So while eyewitness accounts are really good, because that will give us an idea about what people may have seen, having an instrumental data is the one that actually would help us in understanding and making some sort of a leaps in understanding these objects. So well, the reason why I am a little bit hesitant on that is because there is a social science part of this, and there is an actual physical science aspect for this one. So my interest is in the physical science part of it. I know eyewitness accounts are, where people would want to go and see if they, verify or ask questions about. But physical data is what really matters if we want to make anything out of this.
Mm-hmm. Let's step back for a little bit and look at the scientific process in general, because this is not the first scientific subject that had that is taboo, or that was once taboo to study. And I wonder if you both, one of you or you both, could give an example of a scientific phenomena that was once taboo, but we studied it anyway, and it yielded some important results. Are there examples of that have slipped our minds?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give one is endosymbiosis. So this is the idea that our cells actually have a little mini cell inside it, the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, and in a plant, it's chloroplasts. And the hypothesis was that these were separate organisms that got swallowed up by the cell. And Lynn Margulis was one of the champions of this idea, and it was basically ridiculed. That doesn't make any sense, that a cell would swallow up another organism and become a dual organism cell. And we know this is correct now, because we can take the DNA from mitochondria and chloroplasts and show that it's unique, separate DNA from the cell. And so, I mean, it completely revolutionized the way we think about evolution and biology. And yeah, at one point, you could probably risk your job by saying that was a research interest.
That's incredible, because that's such a fundamental understanding of biology now, that cells have mitochondria and that they were originally free, probably free living cells that were swallowed up by the mother cell or father cell. Robbie, what were you going to say? Excuse me.
No, I was saying plate tectonics is another, was another,
Hmm.
taboo subject.
And that's very recent.
That's very recent.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, that was another scientific topic that was a taboo, but taboo in a sense stigmatized. But it was, now we know the Earth operates, the geophysical mechanisms of Earth is based on the cycling of the mantle and the inner mantle, and then the crust, the surface of the Earth, operates with the plate tectonic mechanism. So if we can study those things, we need it because people were interested in that. So we should do a similar scientific study on these UAPs as well.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we inform the general public the scientific process. This is an excellent way of teaching scientific process to non-scientists. So take this opportunity.
So you're saying that would be the added benefit. That's the added benefit.
Correct.
Well, I like the plate tectonics example that Ravi brings up because it was Alfred Wegener who proposed this idea of continental drift. So he didn't actually know about plate tectonics, but he noticed the continents had similar shapes and there was fossil distributions that lined up if you move the continents together. And part of the reason that the hypothesis of continental drift, just continents moving, was rejected at his time was because he lacked an explanatory mechanism. And you had to wait until we discovered seafloor spreading and plate tectonics arrived. And then kind of he was vindicated retrospectively, Wegener's hypothesis. And so there's sort of some parallels here with UAP. I don't like to put forth a hypothesis in terms of what they are. The most I'll say is that they seem to be objects and worth studying. But you don't have to have a full theoretical explanation for what you're studying in order to study it. There's lots of examples of that in science, and plate tectonics is a great one. So we could have kept studying continental drift and maybe we would have arrived at plate tectonics sooner if we've just been a little more open-minded.
Now you said you don't like to engage in speculation, but is it all right if I do?
It's your show, sure.
I don't know if it's my show, but okay. Okay, so while I was preparing for this, I read something in the New York Times that was reported in October, and it was a pretty startling, at least I thought so. The Pentagon reported that China had caught them by surprise by testing a hypersonic missile. And the Pentagon described it as China's Sputnik moment. So it wasn't a small thing, it was a big thing. The way this missile moves sounds a lot like some of these UAPs. It's described as a hypersonic missile that can change course
now they're
suddenly.
talking.
It can zigzag and it can move in ways that would render all US missile defenses obsolete. Now, no one in this article or the other articles that I've read about this, and this was just a few weeks ago, has made the connection to the UAP report. And I'm wondering, is it possible that the answer to what these are is right in front of us?
I would like to point out first that this is, again, based on the recent reports. 50 years ago, if anyone else on this planet had that kind of capability, then I would say probably 60 years ago, 50, 60 years ago. So while it is certainly possible that some of these objects may be from other nations, this explanation cannot be, we cannot have a blanket explanation for all the cases all over the world every time in the past, present, recent past, any time. So yes, it is possible that it could be from, some of these could be from some other countries, but there are just too many cases to have this explanation valid for all of them.
Okay, fair enough. I want to remind people who are listening, audience members, that you can write questions to us, and we're going to start taking questions very soon. I have another one, though, before we move into audience questions. Ravi and Jacob, how do you know when the study is over? At some point, the Condon report, for example, in the 60s ended. At
Dude,
what
I'm so
point do you
excited they're gonna
say,
ask my
well,
questions.
we
I
were able to
posted, like,
identify these
friggin-
objects, or we couldn't identify
There's
these
no
objects?
other good
We
questions in
can't
this live
identify
chat,
all
man.
of
This
the
is
objects.
pathetic. If you guys
And
could even
does
read
that mean
this,
that
is
we just need
16
to accept that
questions,
some
and
things
like
can't be explained? But the question is, when is
most
the
of them
study
are just
over?
statements. People using
Yeah,
it
that's
as a
that's a
chat.
great question. And we have the same problem in our other research that we both do, which is we want to search exoplanets for signs of life, biosignatures or technosignatures, stuff the SETI Institute is interested in too. How do we know when we've searched enough planets to say there's no life? Like, let's say we don't find anything right away. How do we search 1,000 planets or 10,000?
Thanks for the
And
contribution,
so,
man.
there's no end to
Several
when
contributions.
you've
You're the
searched
man.
enough to conclude a negative answer. But you can have some sort of statistical sense, like, well, if we've explained 90% of the unexplained cases and there's 10% left or 1% left, there has to be a little bit of a sense of we've done a statistically complete job and we found nothing. At this point, we're going to step back and reevaluate. But we're not there yet with exoplanets in biosignatures. We're just scratching the surface of that. The NASA, the decadal survey report favorably recommended a exoplanet finding mission. That won't even get us there. That'll find 20 some planets, and I'll be an old man at that point. So, when have we searched enough for life in the universe and exoplanets? Probably when people's great grandchildren in this call are old, assuming the funding continues to mount to support those kind of telescopes. So I think we'd be a long way off for UAP until we have a real data collection effort underway.
Okay.
So can I quickly add something on
Yes,
that?
and then we'll go to some, so you can imagine that the audience has lots of questions. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, one of the things that when we found the first exoplanet, because we work in exoplanets, I'm giving the examples of exoplanet. When we discovered the first exoplanet, we didn't stop there. We said, okay, well, we found an exoplanet, let's go ahead. And then we understood, no, when we found, hundreds and thousands of them now we know that the most common exoplanet is probably a mini Neptune-sized planet, and in our galaxy. And so that's a statistical study. And now we are trying to find out biosignatures or technosignatures in that. When we find one of them, we don't close our telescopes and go back and do something else. We want to find a distribution of life in the universe. So unfortunately, I'm not trying to connect this search for life with UAPs. In my view, they are totally different unless something strong comes into picture that there is some connection. So this is why we need to do this. There is no end to this.
Well, there is an end to this discussion here. This is a SETI talk, of course, and we're discussing whether or not UAPs are a appropriate scientific study. And we do have some questions. So the first question from the audience is, and I'm reading the questions that have been posted here. What is the protocol for public release if UAPs are confirmed as extraterrestrial technology? So if you do decide that it's extraterrestrial, how are you going to break it to us?
Well, so if it's the U.S. government, that has nothing to do with us, and there's secrecy and classification and all that. But if this were, in the hands of private citizens and just scientists doing work, I mean, this is analogous to, again, not that UAPs are necessarily aliens, but finding something like the SETI Institute wants to find extraterrestrial life. How do you announce that? There's been some discussions of, do you have protocols? How do you'd certainly want to check your work before you announce something big like that. You'd maybe call up some friends and make sure they can corroborate your observations and check your calculations. And so you'd at least nominally want to have that. And so, there are some discussions and published protocols that aren't legally binding in any sense, but they make some recommendations as to how do you, responsibly disseminate the information, where you certainly don't want to sit on this and keep it from people who really want to know, but also make sure that you're not putting information out there that then you have to retract later.
Okay, great. So there is a protocol there, and I suppose if you do find something as interesting as an alien craft, you will have a little bit of time to make sure that you let us all know in the appropriate way. We have some more questions here, and I'll just maybe ask that we'll keep the answers sort of brief so we can get through these because people are so interested. The next question is, how much money is needed to fund a surveillance network? Maybe the ideal network that Jacob said he would like to have. What are we looking at here? Ballpark.
I mean, you know, it would probably be, you know, on the order of hundreds of millions to, you know, billion or so if you really wanted to do it seriously. I mean, NASA flagship missions are billions of dollars. You know, the breakthrough initiatives are $100 million efforts to scan the sky. So, I mean, I think if you really want to seriously collect data in a global scale, it's going to have a big price tag like that.
Okay, big price tag. We'll just go with that. It's a big price tag. That's fair enough. I think we can all probably imagine. This other one is a little bit more specific. How can we train our observational systems and sensors to recognize if there are unknown craft entering or exiting the atmosphere at high velocity, or exhibiting the observables described by the AATIP, which is the government report, I think. How do you do that? How do you set up a network that would be able to observe if objects were entering or leaving our atmosphere?
So there's a lot of things that are influxing and outfluxing, influxing into the Earth's atmosphere. So noise is a big factor here. So we need noises, right? So we need to have a good algorithms to distill out the noise and have identify the interesting ones. Even if you find something, it may not be the one that you were looking for. Maybe it's something that you overlooked. And so to do that, we need to have a good analysis methods, algorithms that can be trained. Those are the machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms are probably the ones that we need to focus on developing.
So you'd be collecting the raw data, observing the mayskies, and then using these algorithms to filter out. And this actually folds into the next question is, and I think you've answered this, but maybe if you don't mind summarizing again, is how you would sort out the thousands of astronomical transients that happen every night. This audience member is saying that he or she goes camping, and when they're in a very dark area, you see meteors, you see lots of things happening up there. So how do you filter out some of those, as you say, natural, I use that word in quotes, but natural phenomena?
Well, we know some nature of some of these astronomical transient phenomena, right? So if we have the data, maybe we can rule out some portion of the data collected just by comparison with the known astronomical phenomena characteristics. And even if some of them are left over beyond that, they may still turn out to be the known phenomena, astronomical phenomena, just because they may be having different characteristics than what we have not observed before. So like I said, there won't be a aha moment and saying, oh, here is something that is totally different. You will find several of them totally different, but you will have to carefully this is where our understanding of the noise phenomena comes into picture. We cannot say that we found something. We can only say that these look interesting, and that's where we have to stop. We cannot go beyond.
Do the objects look like any kind of astronomical phenomena that either one of you are familiar with? Anything?
Potential misidentification can always happen. So yes, some of them could possibly look like some astronomical phenomena. But then again, given the kind of data, if you have a spectral data, the wavelength data, if you have some kind of a movement data, maybe then we can sort out and then filter out. Otherwise, they may look similar.
But I mean, when you looked at those videos, did you say, oh God, that looks a little bit like a meteor, that looks like...
Based on the snippets of data, the pilots have seen something and they say they see something. So I think that is not a meteor.
I want to get to the other questions here, but you know, in your article, you quote Carl Sagan, and you say that you quote him, and he says, "Scientists are particularly bound to have open minds. That is the lifeblood of science," and that goes to the point that Ravi just made right now. In what way would this UAP study be an exemplar of the way that science is supposed to be done? And what is the role of humility in this? And that is a word that you used in a conversation I had with you, Jacob. So what would this mean in terms of being a demonstration of the best of a scientific endeavor?
Sure, yeah, you know, as scientists, we don't become scientists because we know everything. And I think some scientists forget that we don't know everything and therefore we're scientists. We're actually scientists because we don't know so much about the universe and because we want to know. That's why we're scientists. And so if there's something that we don't know what it is, it's anomalous. It's an object in the sky, we don't know what it is. That should be something that gets scientists excited. Maybe not every single scientist, but enough of them because it's something we don't understand. And so I think you know, there's sort of a humility that needs to be at the core of what drives us as scientists, that we don't know, and we're actually always trying to prove our models and our hypotheses wrong to learn more. And we don't want to we're not trying to arrive at the top of the mountain and say, all right, I figured it all out now. We're you know, that there's I think this hubris kind of can infect science a little bit too much, and we definitely need more humility in terms of just realizing that we really don't know a lot about the universe still.
I'd like to offer a counterpoint on that. Scientists are, you know, understandably skeptical and conservative because it needs a rigorous analysis and rigorous testing. That is how everything we know now, we have now, is because of the scientific methodology we have, followed through. But it has its drawbacks. Process takes time, so some things may get delayed. But in the end, the thing that stands of all these tests will remain as the solid explanation for something. So the process is difficult, the process is skeptical, the process is conservative, but it works.
The processes also include publishing. And that brings me to the next question that an audience member has, which is, will you publish the study? And will you publish it in something called a UAP journal? Will there be a journal like that? And will these be peer reviewed?
Yes, I think that is publishing is one thing that has to happen, and because that's where we can share the data. People can, our colleagues can criticize it. That's good for science, and then may poke holes in our analysis. That's again good because then we will refine it and see what we have our own. Not we, as not in just Jacob and I, but in general, the people who publish. So it is. It need to be published because we can share the data, we can share the results, and people can test it.
Okay, and there's another one. Thank you for that.
Look at her furrowed brow. She's reading my question now.
We're scrolling by pretty fast. This next question is about funding again, and where this is a little bit different from how much, but the question is where
are these questions from? These are not in the Q&A. I don't see any of these in the live Q&A.
Private philanthropists. If the U.S.
This is really weird,
right? So clearly, she's already got pre-written questions that she's supposed to ask, and well, any real ones? No, those don't exist.
Private funding, and are you willing to? Okay, let me ask this then. If of all the possible conclusions of the nature of these objects, what result would be the most scientifically important and personally exciting to you? And this may be our last. There's one other question I'm going to ask you about how the public can get involved, but this may require some speculation. And I know Ravi was saying you want to be very careful about that. But if you could just now share with us what would be the most scientifically important and what would actually personally be very, very exciting. And I know balloons is one of them, because I know you got very excited by the idea that there's 400 different kinds of balloons. But what else might it be?
I would defer this to Jacob.
No. I think you're required to answer this.
I have to be careful here because I try to avoid this kind of speculations, and anything that follows a scientific method, and then whatever comes out of it I would rest, and I would be more comfortable trusting that results, and I would be more excited about that, because then I know I'm excited for the right reasons.
Okay, so it sounds like what would excite you is to have an answer.
Only
And
one
feel
more
like you've
question,
gone
yet
through the
you
method,
guys
the
put up
appropriate
4 and none of
method
them have been
science,
asked.
and it was a rigorous study, and you came up with some conclusion at the end.
Correct.
Okay, and you wouldn't be just a little excited if it were aliens? A little bit?
Little bit is an understatement.
Okay, so he's revealing that. Jacob, how about you? Scientifically important and maybe just personally would be very exciting.
Sure. Well, one of the things that drew me to this topic is the fact that it's a taboo. It's because as a scientist, that really irks just my core sensibilities of like, you can't tell me that I'm not allowed to study something if I think it's interesting. And so in that sense, having this conversation and writing, articles is encouraging for me. And I would be, in that sense, happy if, 10 or 20 years from now, you could be a professor and UAP is one of your research portfolio items and nobody blinks twice at it and there's funding available for it. Even if it's an ongoing inquiry at that point, I would be really excited that, we were a small part of bringing a field into the mainstream from the fringes and acknowledging that there's something interesting. So I would be really happy about that. But I will say, if there's really, if what we see, not just from the Navy videos, but observations that have been reported over time, if there's really unknown physics that we don't understand, I would be really excited to learn something really new about physics, something that challenges what we learned in our college physics classes and forces us to reconceptualize our technology. And I don't even care what the source is. Like, I'm an astrobiologist, of course I'd be excited about finding aliens, just even on an exoplanet. But in terms of what UAP are, even if it's totally decoupled from anything extraterrestrial, but it teaches us new physics, that would be really cool.
So if it's on the like in the ballpark of something like dark energy or dark matter or something like that.
Sure, that would be
the
cool.
finding of dark energy, that's actually quite decent.
Anything, it's something we don't understand. And then if it's mundane, if it's something that they're all balloons, but for some reason they all got misclassified, well, that seems important. That might even be like a safety risk or national defense. If we're misidentifying that many mundane objects, there was still something we didn't know.
Yeah, we do have time for a few more questions, but that is one of them. Do you think that these objects pose a risk to people, to aircraft?
Yeah, it is a safety issue.
There is a safety issue
because we hear from pilots who have reported. We don't somehow, if this is a stigmatized topic and a taboo, we don't hear from several others. So this is a classic example of absence of evidence is not an evidence of absence.
Jacob, you said that you would not be, I'm paraphrasing, so I don't know if I have this exactly right, but you would not be disappointed if it weren't aliens, if it were some other physical phenomena. That would be terrific. But let's say that that they are alien craft. Would that make you feel as though your work in SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, had been for nothing? That's a question from one of our listeners, that listening for these signals in the end was all for naught because they were here visiting us all the
that is a great question. And so my interest in SETI is not just in listening for radio signals for exoplanets. I mean, I'll make this quick, but we should look for atmospheric pollution and other things, not just radio signals. But there's also other things we can look for in SETI. We've sent the Voyager and Pioneer spacecraft outside our solar system. We're planning to send probes to nearby star systems. There's no reason extraterrestrials couldn't send spacecraft into our solar system. And so we call that solar system SETI. And so the idea that there could be extraterrestrial artifacts flying around the solar system, whether they're broken or not, that's something I've been interested in for a while, and I think that's something we should continue to study. So the connection I think that a lot of people may have in mind is that if you have a free-floating craft in the solar system that's of alien origin and it enters Earth's atmosphere, now it's a UAP. And I'm not sure, I haven't seen any evidence myself to connect the two, to connect the UAP that have been observed over time with this idea of solar system SETI. But I acknowledge the fact that hypothetically, if there were a spacecraft, alien spacecraft flying through the space, it would be of interest to SETI up until the moment it enters the atmosphere. And now it's called a UAP. And because of the stigma, we can't SETI it. And so that particular scenario, I'm not convinced that that's what we have seen yet. But you have to keep an open mind in that sense that you can't, because it's stigmatized, it just creates this problem where, in that one hypothetical, SETI would miss the thing it's trying to find. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, if we found that they were extraterrestrial, no, I would be excited then, because it would tell me that there is a connection between solar system SETI and UAP. Mm-hmm. I don't see the connection now, but I would be excited to find that there was a connection.
Mm-hmm. So they're not mutually exclusive. Pilots have a great view, of course. But one of the audience members writes in, what about the astronauts on the International Space Station? Has anyone contacted them and wondered what their eyes in the sky might tell us?
Not that I'm aware of.
No, okay. All right, well, the final question then, you gave us the big picture question of what you would like this to be and what you personally would get excited about. Nice to know that Ravi would get excited about alien craft. What can the public do? And is there anything that someone writes, anything that the regular folks can do to contribute to the efforts around UAP research?
Well, there's bills in the Senate right now, and I think Congress is generally interested in this. So I think that's something you can do, is just write to your Congress people, tell them that you're interested in this. I would say try to decouple it from the pseudoscience and from the just focus on what we've been talking about here. That there's a need for further scientific investigation. And I think the more Congress hears from people that they care about this, and that it's in a coherent, rational, scientific argument, I think that'll only help.
Lovely. Well, Jacob and Ravi, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It went by so fast for this SETI talk discussing whether or not UAPs should be investigated scientifically. I think you made a very good case that they should be. I'll turn things over to Bill now.
Great. Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Jacob, and thank you, Ravi. That was really fascinating. I think some great topics emerge from this conversation. First and foremost, the need for a rigorous scientific approach to answer this question and to separate it and differentiate it from sort of the pseudoscience that has dominated the topic. I thought it was also very interesting that you cited these really important examples of plate tectonics and also the phenomena of mitochondria in cellular biology as being topics that were previously thought to be, or ideas that were previously thought to be absolutely absurd, and now are accepted as mainstream science and scientifically backed knowledge. It's also interesting that UAP as a phenomena, I mean, that as a phenomena, I think, although perhaps people even much longer ago than 50 or 60 years had seen things in the sky they couldn't really understand, I think it's fair to say that the sort of UFO UAP phenomena has been something in the public conscious for about 50 or 60 years, I guess since the late 1940s. And yet one of the things that separates our time now from that period then is we do actually have the tools and technologies to do rigorous scientific inquiry on this subject. And it's a little bit like SETI, although I think in SETI, it's probably fair to say that people for thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years have looked up in the sky and wondered, are we alone? But what makes this time unique is our ability to answer that question because we have the tools and technologies to address it. So I think these are fascinating points. As I said in my opening remarks, I do think that there's, I would certainly support and accept the funding for undertaking a program where we can apply some of the tools and techniques, things, for example, like our CAMS meteor detection camera system, which is a worldwide network of camera systems always looking up, that could be repurposed in some format to do this kind of work, at least in the optical domain. So there is lots of room, and I think lots of opportunity here. Sorry, I don't know if somebody was also trying to say something just then, but if not, in any case, I do want to again thank you, Molly and Jacob, and Ravi, and also I want to thank you in our audience for your great questions. And of course, like always, we never really have time to address them all, but I hope we addressed some of the ones that you thought were particularly interesting. I do want to point out again that, as always, we reached a really global audience this evening, and I think that just proves again that curiosity truly does unite us all as human beings, regardless of our language, our gender, our race, or our ethnicity. We share this common curiosity. In the United States, we had people from Virginia, Hawaii, Colorado, Arizona, Michigan, Minnesota, California, Texas, Alabama, Rhode Island, Illinois, New York, Oregon, Georgia, Utah, Arizona, Washington, Missouri, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Massachusetts, Alaska, and Ohio. And internationally, we had folks and friends with us from Mexico, Canada, Peru, Colombia, Italy, India, Australia, Ecuador, Norway, the UK, Panama, and Argentina. So how wonderful to have such a global audience with us tonight, and thank you all for joining us. So before closing, let me just remind you that SETI Talks is a production of the SETI Institute. We are in Mountain View, California. We are a nonprofit research and education institution, and our mission is to lead humanity's quest to understand the origins and prevalence of life and intelligence in the universe, and to share that knowledge to inspire and guide present and future generations. This SETI Talks lecture series is supported in part by donations from the public, from friends of science like you. We bring these lectures and other events to you at no cost, but we're very grateful for any and all donations that allow us to continue bringing the stories of extraordinary science and exploration to you. So you can join our community, you can be part of our quest. Visit SETI.org for more information. You can make a donation if you're so inclined. Sign up for our monthly science newsletter we call Journey, which is full of all kinds of wonderful stories. I think, in fact, we're now putting that out weekly. So there's all kinds of news coming at you all the time. So thanks again to all of you for being with us today. And thanks to tonight's moderator, Molly Bentley, and our guest speakers, Jacob and Ravi. Thanks as well to our sponsor, Call Cruise, for funding this conversation on UAPs. And of course, I want to thank Rebecca, Frank, Lee, Simon, Beth, Jasmine, and the rest of the team at the SETI Institute who make the SETI Talk series possible. Don't forget to visit our YouTube channel and tour the amazing array of lectures, presentations, and other videos. And tonight's talk will be among those in the coming days. And if you're interested in sponsoring a SETI Talks event, get in touch with us. Our email address is info@seti.org. And remember that the work we do at the SETI Institute is for all of us, for all of humankind. So don't just stand by and watch. You can come and join us at SETI.org and get involved. The search for life beyond Earth is a journey of ultimate discovery, and we invite you to come along. So thanks again for being with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna try to reach out to them and get involved, man. This is exciting stuff, man. That was it. Done. Look at them. Look at that, dude.
Like,
Can you believe that shit, dude? Oh my god.
One of your questions was asked.
Not one of them. That was pretty revealing
Yeah.
for our live audience and for everyone who watches this channel. I hope this spreads, man. Like SETI get it. So I posted my questions in the chat. Like, I don't know if you guys read them, but
yeah, I saw that. That's pretty.
They were related to my summary of points that I was going to cover in my report. So they seem to harp on this whole idea, right? And they're like, oh, maybe there's some new physics I'd be interested in if it's out there, right? And they cited the Einstein stuff, right? About the speed of light. Even if we had, it would take them quite a while to get here across these vast distances of space. That's the main argument we always hear, right? But no discussion of warp drives, Alcubierre, White, etc., etc. No mention of the Einstein-Rosen-Podolsky paradox, ER equals EPR, or the idea of using these, Einstein-Rosen light bridges, which can actually, squeeze the quantum vacuum such that the speed of light changes along that whole axis. And
Jeremy, it's silly excuse to investigate. SETI, silly excuse to investigate. They're distraction.
as I mentioned, those other scientists, I'll go back to those in a second here. Bernard Hayes, he's got a whole CV that you can look up. If you look up Bernard Hayes curriculum vitae, you'll find a whole bunch of physics papers, and including studies that were, contracted by Lockheed Martin for advanced propulsion, theories and stuff. And a lot of this stuff's talked about in Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff's papers. And also Jack Sarfati has a lot of these theories on these warp drives and stuff as well. So yes, definitely go and read up on the literature on those. They have this whole idea of, what inertia is created by this quantum field, and that,
Portal here.
What is ER equals EPR?
All right, so that comes from actually Leonard Susskind, and that's this whole idea of the Einstein-Rosen bridge is a solution to this EPR paradox that was pointed out by Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen.
And EPR is also electron paramagnetic resonance, which is what we're doing with the Alzaphon experiment.
Yeah, that's something that's a little bit different, but this is more of a thing that's done through light and the vacuum between space.
Is
And
it
it's
something
sort of
like the sun portals that NASA's measured that's between like the solar flare when the sun hits like the magnetic fields of the planets and stuff? Or is that a different one?
So they very briefly in that article, right, mentioned this stuff on this slide. Where was the slide that I had talked about this? The one with the Chinese you saw Hypersonic tests and all that.
Jeremy, yo. So like a couple of years ago at UNM, I studied the Einstein-Rosen bridge stuff, which is Ragnarok. What's the Bifrost bridge, and Thor is supposedly
this whole
an
legend
Einstein-Rosen
of
bridge.
Norse mythology about how these gods got here.
You're right. So if we can tie that into something that's in popular culture, people would understand that EPR reference. There was
sort of what I had on that slide with the EPR reference. It's sort of this idea of this rainbow bridge.
Black strings. It's a two-dimensional singularity, and it's Praetorius is the mathematician's name. And that's the only mathematics that I've ever come across that would supposedly explain the point A connecting to point B is like... it doesn't make sense. It's a two-dimensional singularity. So
I was surprised that they mentioned the ATIP report, but they didn't get into any of like the deep science that was done under the ATIP report, which is contained in these studies here, which I linked to. I'll link to them in the description. They have one on bulk metallic glasses and the whole theory on metallic glass about how it's super strong and has super elastic and tensile and compressive strength. It's a very remarkable material, and it's off the charts for as far as lightness and strength. Then it gets into biomaterials, advanced medical devices, and all this research that they were doing into advanced biological and medical systems and stuff like this. This was all formerly, I think, classified and unclassified. So you can only imagine what you start diving in the bibliographies of these reports, and you start learning even deeper stuff as far as the science goes. This was materials for advanced aerospace platforms, which was another one of the DIRDs or DIRDs, the Defense Intelligence Reference Documents that were written for the Defense Intelligence Agency. So if you want real actionable and interesting intelligence, it's contained in these reports. But again, it's like SETI's giving the kindergarten really, what was up with those questions, man? Like none of those questions I saw in the Q&A. In the live, there was a ton of people in the live chat. Then they disabled that. This one's on metallic spintronics, which is related to the other EPR that you were talking about, or electro paramagnetic resonance.
Like, that's just straight evidence that it's all pre-scripted and that it's all just a fake show. And all I was left with was the feeling that, as in junior high and high school, and like 20 years ago when SETI program first came out, and you'd donate your computer CPU to look for those signals. In fact, they were looking for it just to cover them up, and I helped contribute to covering up that shit by helping them out.
Yeah, right. Man, it's so like, yeah, that was pretty no, I don't have two live
Put your
shows, guys.
questions
This is
up
the
for us
real
to
live
see.
show. The other one is a premiere. It's from Saturday. It's not live. I can't be in New Jersey and home at the same time. But what I'm doing, this is the real live one, so I'm not even really watching or managing the other one. I can't right now. So, but anyways, yeah, I don't know if you caught the first part of this, so you can go back to it, but I have a whole presentation, and I was going to put some slides in to talk about, shape memory alloys and this nitinol wire stuff. First metallic glass alloys were invented in 1960. A lot of these materials that are coming out now and are related to research that was done back, then, but I don't know. It's just interesting, all the stuff that's coming out now, especially with optics and and nanomaterials. These phase conjugate mirrors, barium titanate, the Vanta black material, which is a nanomaterial made of like a forest of carbon nanotubes.
Can you please go into more detail on these mirrors? Because I've been looking into them a little bit, but like, those are nuts. The different like portals and stuff when rotating them, time dilation effects.
Yeah, so I want to explain those phase conjugate mirrors. There's some really interesting science involved there. In these optical materials, these lenses, metamaterials, and quasicrystals, which can be used to make these just amazing lenses. But these self-pumped phase conjugate materials, like this this barium titanate stuff, right? So it has this optical image resolution. So the original slide, and then it sort of goes into phase. It starts producing the image, and then it gets into phase, and it produces this phased conjugate image of the original image. It takes a while for it to get into phase, because literally what this material is doing, right? So let's find that video, right? Is this the video with it? No, this is it. Here's a phase conjugate mirror. So they put it with the where they put the cup over the frosted glass. Have you seen that one? And it finds its way back through the frosting, like through the diffusion. It like has to calculate. I gotta find that one. No, and I can't. I covered this on an earlier video that I talked about this on. Barium tight. Why can't I find it? I have to look up on YouTube and find this. Phase conjugate mirror. Yeah, this is the one. I have to look it up on YouTube. So this is the self-pumped phase conjugate mirror. This is a 3-minute video. So what happens is that it goes through this frosted glass, right? This glass is frosted glass, and in a regular mirror, their deflected beams are scattered in every which way, and you get this crazy deflected image through the glass, right? So what happens in a phase conjugate mirror is it bounces the waves back at the same way that they hit. So all these different waves that go through all these different ways, it bounces them. It starts recalculating and bouncing them back, and once it goes into phase, it literally reverses the image and bounces the same image back through the frosted glass. Like it acts if the glass wasn't even there, like, and that distortion didn't happen, because it reverses the light waves in the same way that they strike. You get it? So in a normal mirror, it goes it bounces off the other direction in the same angle. Whatever angle it struck this mirror, it will bounce off in the other direction at that same angle, right? But in a phase conjugate mirror, it bounces back at the same angle. Always it just bounces back no matter which way the light hits this mirror. It bounces back that same way. What's the key to understand? Continuous wave phase conjugation is an image-bearing beam is demonstrated using a single domain crystal of barium titanate and nothing else. The device operates by four-wave mixing using the photorefractive effect, but without any external pumping. So they don't have external pumping in the four-wave mixing. So normally there's a pump up. There's in a four-wave mixing scheme, there's a pump beam. But without any external pump beams or external mirrors, the customary pumping beams are derived from the incident beam and are internally reflected inside the crystal adjacent to an edge. The device is self-starting and has a phase conjugate reflectivity of about 30%. So imagine making 100% phase conjugate reflective mirrors. That would be some pretty intense stuff. Yeah, because that's just changing the surface of the mirror. It's not changing the physics of how the beams reflect on the surface of the mirror itself. That's the difference. There's that mirror. Funky. You see how it went, like that funky thing? I've watched this video like 100 times, man. It's just like, I'm gonna post this in the live chat so people can go check it out. But so that frosting of the glass, it's got the original image that goes through, and then now they're collecting it, bouncing back off the glass. So the original image comes this way, and then it bounces back off the glass to reflect on the screen. It takes it a little while. Look how it goes into resonance, and then it appears. So it takes it a second to go into resonance with all the the beams, the phase conjugation. So there's this whole field of what's called nonlinear optics, and that's at the end slide of my presentation. And nonlinear optics is the branch of optics that describes the behavior of light in nonlinear media. So that's like left-handed metamaterials and these phase conjugate mirrors, or any media in which the polarization density P responds nonlinearly to the electric field E of the light. The nonlinearity is typically observed only at very high light intensities, values of atomic electric fields, typically 10 to the 8th volts per meter, such as those provided by lasers above the what's called Schwinger limit. And that Schwinger limit is that limit at which gamma rays produce pair production, where gamma ray will spontaneously produce an electron and a positron with enough energy to escape each other's electric pull. charge. The vacuum itself is expected to become nonlinear. In nonlinear optics, the superposition principle no longer holds. So that's key part about the superposition principle. If we can get enough energy bouncing around our craft trapped inside this light wave, then we might be able to bend the fabric of space-time using that energy. And this could be a way that why we see these craft with they're like light craft, and why they have these glowing orbs that are like plasmas or ball lightning kind of looking effects that are reported in some UAPs, that perhaps they're utilizing some sort of vacuum warping effect via the light and the trap and enough intense light that can cause nonlinear optics to produce where the vacuum itself becomes nonlinear and the superposition principle no longer holds. It's certainly and no noise coming out. Jeez, can you hear me now? I got my mic working, right? Anyways, Falcon Space is here, and we were going to do some he wanted to try to show some lab results, because we were trying to get lab tests set up all day the other day. That's on the other stream, dude. Yeah, the other stream, the audio is messed up. I hope the audio is not messed up on this one.
I'll show quickly some monoatomic gold, silver, copper I made on my stream the other day here, and how it's formed different buoyancy electromagnetic layers.
And how did you form this, and what did you do?
Through electrolysis, it was gold and gold and nano-coated copper on the cathode and silver on the anode side. And it was like a 5-watt. Here, it was. This is the copper coil that's nano-coated. And there's gold and then silver. Oh, and there's a little bit of zinc as well I used. And they're connected just to like a 5 watt or USB there. But if you can see,
all right, I'm not sure what this has to do with the stream or the UAP subject, but we'll get back to that.
yeah, absolutely.
I want to show this video real quick to my audience. This was sent to me. If people want to see a cool UFO video, this is allegedly a UFO in China that they shot a missile at. So we're going to check out some UFO footage. Who's down for UFO footage in the audience? We want some serious UAP analysis. This one's one of the coolest ones I've seen in a while. All right, you came for UFOs. Explain this one. Yeah, we down. These are 4 UFOs that they saw on this radar, and they have this weird effect under them. It's almost like they're those plasma balls being projected from like projectors on the ground. Could these be ECCMs? Or are they like stationary physical objects? It's kind of weird that mirage effect field that you see, coming out from the bottoms of them. So there goes the missile that it was shot at them. And they just they're just continuing to hold position. They're like stationary to the mountain though. They're just like sitting there. He goes back to the ups the magnification. Yeah, but why? If they were just balloons, the missile would have taken them out like easily, for sure. You know?
They're not balloons though, because like the gas, that much gas coming out, like what the hell is that?
There's a
Like,
gas
they would have
coming out the
deflated. They
bottom.
would have deflated by now.
Yeah.
I guess it could be like a solid state burner or something in it.
Somebody make this.
Yeah. The only good debunk I've heard of this video, I've seen this one a couple of years ago, but I mean, in White Sands Missile Test Range, they have a high-speed Kevlar cable, and they have these. They can put up targets on it, and it looks geographically very similar to that, and it's a missile target. That's the only good debunk I've heard of this video, but the fact that the missile hits it and they're still there streaming that stuff out underneath, I don't know. Cool. I think it's real. I'd like to see it in color.
It's interesting, certainly. But yeah, I don't have much more information on it other than that's the YouTube video. But yeah, thanks for that, Aiden. It's certainly a curious video. What those things could be. It's like they're pooping though. It's not like they're shooting rockets out the bottom. It's like almost like a warping or a mirage effect. I wonder if that's what they have to do is change the space-time curvature for the GR, metric tensor around the craft to warp it somehow. But why would I have to go down that far if this was, I don't know. Yeah, it could have. Like could have been flares along this wire, like he said, at target range. Yeah, that's probably what it is. Again,
It's a high probability that's what it looked like.
Again, this is where we lose that whole top of this pyramid that I described in this first slide, right? This is where we get to the actionable intelligence, This part is key. We have to sift through all this information and data and get real knowledge and actionable decision-making intelligence. By the way, one of the things they said that you could do was to apply to, go talk to your congressman. So I actually, I wrote to David Ciceline's office, who's my congressman, and I requested an appointment, a meeting with him. I guess, we'll see how that goes. I heard he's like a interesting guy. But yeah, I'm gonna have to go and sit down and give him a briefing. I'll put something together and show him the actionable intelligence and why we should be concerned with this. I'll mention that his buddy Jack Reed was down at URI for the quantum computing conference too, and that it's related. All this quantum technology and stuff's related, and something they need to be paying attention to. So hopefully that goes good, man. I'll let you guys know how that goes. I put a whole email together. I sent his office and everything. Maybe I'll post that somewhere so people can check it out. But yeah, I'm getting tired, guys. Falcon, did you have some experiments to show in the lab here? So again, we got to keep plugging away at SETI, man. It would be great if SETI could get, like I said, you know, they need to take some hints from more of the stuff that's going on that I mentioned in my opening talk before I let them take over. I was very disappointed in SETI's coverage of this topic and that live stream. I could have done a much better job than either of those two guest scientists. It's a shame. But I wanted to leave people with where's that slide that I had mentioned that, you know, they need to, my summaries right here of all the points. I have that slide. I think I got rid of it somehow.
Just to give you some context and answer your questions, it has to do with anti-gravity in that these are the metamaterials that you speak of. And if you watch me here tap on it and bang on it, they stay in place. And that is anti-gravitic effects of buoyancy in regards to gravity, not just some gas floating randomly in it.
It's not a collection of gas molecules on the particles themselves or the buoyancy of the particles themselves. Do you think it's a gravity effect? Well, when you can show me how to make a craft that does that in air. Oh, look at something just flew up.
So there's a couple there that flew up, right? But you see all the bubbles like came off and out, but it did not. The vast majority is staying in that spot, and it's not the bubbles that are holding it down. And most bubbles come from the ground.
Sea monkeys? Yeah, we need to take over SETI, man. This is crazy. So I mentioned that they need to study all this stuff. They need to follow all propulsion, the APEC conference, alienscientist.com, this channel, and high frequency gravitational waves. They need a crash recovery and debris collection and analysis team like Bigelow Aerospace had. And it seems like all these private corporations had those allegations of these guys who work for Battelle that say they worked on this material back in the 40s, and it's all been covered up and put underground. And they've slowly, you know, let pieces of it out. Also read up on the state-of-the-art spoofing and hypersonic directed energy, you know, propulsion technologies. They did mention that kind of stuff a little bit. They didn't give people too much scientific information and background on that, but they did completely skip over the TD Barnes Area 51 stuff completely. Didn't even address it. They kind of just like, oh man, pretty revealing. You know, my main takeaway points again. There's lots of other things they could look at, like carbonado diamonds and whatnot. So intermetallic alloys, self-replicating space probes like the von Neumann stuff, and this, of course, I want to keep playing this clip.
Let me see if I can remember. Thought I'd never forget some of this. I don't know why my mind is so blank on some of these things. They asked a lot of the scientists what was their best system going out into the atmosphere or going into the ocean, and how deeply we had penetrated galaxies, things like that. And of course, they were very quick to let us know that we didn't know anything.
And yeah,
They did not menace us or threaten us at all, because they knew right away we were intellectually inferior and scientifically inferior.
then how was it that they crashed? Was there any information about that? If they have such technology, how is it that?
Something had gone wrong, and that was one of the major things that we asked them. We asked them what they ate. We asked them what kind of gases they needed. We asked them about their life support, their origin. We asked them what they used for propulsion. We asked them what there was, things like that. And we asked them what they thought went wrong. You know, if and why they were, first of all, even coming here. Why did they come to visit us?
Do you remember what they said?
Obviously, they're so obviously superior. Why would they want to come to Earth?
What did they say?
Well, this one indicated, at least telepathically, like they think they don't have a sex like we do, so I can't say he or she or something. It indicated that they were exploring intergalactic space, what we would call intergalactic space. He didn't call it that. Search a better source than where they were. They were running into a problem where they are from because of some physical condition, energy-wise. And they needed to go some other place. And so we took it that they were wanting to maybe colonize some other place. And they were finding that Earth was entirely unsuitable to them. And that's why they were, because they found out that we are not at their level at all, so they had nothing to fear from us.
A little bit. I think they would have a lot to fear. But they still didn't know what happened to their propulsion system that would have brought them down?
No, they didn't exactly know. They knew that it was a malfunction of something, but they didn't know. And in fact, one being just on the verge of trying to go with a couple engineers and scientists into it in more detail when he succumbed. It succumbed, and they couldn't bring him back.
Were they only one ship, or were they just there by themselves as a scout ship, or were there any others in the Armada?
They claimed there were 8. That was a Maverick that somehow lost position or something. I don't know whether it was a time warp or what, but they got out of the direction where the others were even going. And one ship he claimed crashed in Siberia in the same group. Okay. Of course, he didn't know what it was called, but we told him it's the United States.
Did he say where they were from and what star system? You said, and were they from this galaxy?
They indicated to us that they were not from our galaxy, definitely not. And the star system, the name was absolutely gibberish, but we didn't know what it meant.
Was that at that point in time? Do you have any knowledge whether we found that star system now?
So far as I know, we still haven't known.
And how many people were around when you were hearing, or were there government people, were there other scientific people,
there were military people, there were scientists, there were lower-on people. There were many individuals about both men and women, many people.
How did you get from where you were with the scientists you were with to that point of where the ship.
Military vehicles to the site.
Were you interrogated at all before they allowed you to see this?
No, because I was just sort of in the background, and I was just, I had no positive, even fifth or sixth line interest in it or anything. I was just to be in assisting the scientist that I was with and part of his entourage, so to speak. And that's why I was there, and I was just permitted to be there.
How did you feel when you saw this and saw what was taking place?
Well, I was quite overwhelmed and awed. Real or fantasy, I wondered whether there was somebody playing a terrible untruth on us. And it's just that the people, there was such activity and behavior and interest on the part of people, I knew it was something serious.
One of the things that interests me that she says is that this craft was like, it was dull metallic gray when you got up close to it, but as you backed off of it, it started to turn invisible. And that, like, when you backed off of it, like the far field effects or whatever would, coalesce to something, and that like it would start turning invisible. That's super interesting to me. Maybe she made it all up. Who knows? But again, there's so many witnesses that say that they saw this Roswell craft and testified to it. And some of them say some really interesting things. Maybe there's some actionable intelligence there. Who knows? What's going on with the experiments, Falcon? You got force meter up here. I wish I could make this small. The small window. Nope. There we go. Well, that's just me. Nope. So yeah, again, we got some live experiments going there down in the Falcon Space Lab.
Oh yeah, we're waiting for a battery to. I'm on two speakers. Let me fix this.
Hold up a second. Let me do this and let me. All right, you should be good now. Try it now. Try it now.
Okay, this should be better. We're waiting for a battery to finish charging. Basically, what we're looking at here is a spinning magnetic disc experiment that's set up using a 3-string configuration. So it's sort of like a pendulum. There's 2 strings on the side, and then there's a 3rd string that's going up to a scale. You can see that scale because I put a little black tape on it. It's really covered in aluminum foil as a Faraday shield. In the center top, which correlates to a corner of the Faraday cage. There's also a high voltage power supply over there running off of 3 D-cell nickel metal hydrate batteries that are fresh off the charger. We're just waiting for the lithium battery to finish charging. That will run up the spinner. And then we can apply the high voltage, run up the spinner, and watch the scale measurements. The disc material starts off with mu metal, and then it's copper. Then there's the magnets. So we have different permeabilities of magnetism, mu metal being very high, copper being negative. And then we have plastic. Then we have magnets, and then we have plastic. And then there's another copper plate that's not spinning with a high voltage negative potential on it. And this is all facing the corner of the Faraday cage up where that vernier scale is pulling in the corner. I have it running on 2 separate computers right now. One is showing you the camera setup, which is on a GoPro. The other one's giving you the live scale measurement. So just give us a moment and we'll get the battery in there.
Yeah, I wish you could give us a look around, a more like round look around that room instead of just the still camera, so I kind of get a 3D sense of that device and a little more
Um,
of what we're looking at here. I can't see where that string goes into the top of the ceiling.
I'm going to change over the mic so that you get the audio from inside the Faraday cage. And
So this is a Faraday cage we're looking at, and those walls are aluminum plate, metal.
okay, you should be able to hear me now inside here.
The electromagnetic
This is
field.
the setup we have.
Very cool. So there's a disc.
That's the moon metal, that's the copper, and there's the magnets hanging in there. Here we have the high voltage disc. High voltage is supplied by that and rectified via tube, which is all running off of the 3 D-cell batteries. And up there is the scaling. I'll get the battery for the spinner, and we should be just about ready to go.
Right on. Your camera's slipping a little bit, man. It's sinking down now. It's no longer pointed at the device. It's now like it's slowly pointing closer and closer to the floor. It's like a sloth is controlling your camera. Mark, I'm going to play the other half of this video.
Has anyone seen the remote control?
Fix the camera. You're pointing at the floor now.
Like an RC remote control. What? No, not that one. No, the other one. He uses little
Do you remember what they called that clearance that you had? Did they name it for you?
Remote control.
I don't even recall that except a file. I'd have to look that up. I don't know whether I even have a note on that.
The program that you're working on with Einstein, was it funded by the government or was it a university grant?
Grant to him at that university at that time to have outstanding students from around the country picked to work with him that particular summer in nuclear chemistry.
Did you have a title that was given to you while you worked there?
Special student.
Did he take any other students with him?
No. The only student.
Lucky you. Come on.
I was his pet. I have to admit that. I was.
Okay.
I have to admit that. There were 29 that summer.
Were you there?
The girl either.
Okay, are we ready?
Alien died. Were you there at that point in time?
No, I wasn't. I was back at the motel in a city nearby, and I had been told, and I would be able to keep the being alive.
How many were there originally?
9. I saw 9, 8 bodies, and then later we communicated with that one, so there were 9. And I remember that very well. They were a very light, soft, gray, I'd call it grayish green, really. And they had a slim, lean. They had no nose, but they had markings where a nose opening would be. They had eyes and a mouth, no eyebrows. They had ears. They had a very forehead.
Okay, what kind of readings are we getting? Aiden,
And
can you tell me what the camera looks like? I need somebody by the camera and somebody by the computer.
5 feet tall.
Somebody by the laptop and somebody by the desktop.
What meandered on Earth.
What did their eyes look like?
At the laptop, what do you see?
They were very prominent. They were
Yes.
the obvious thing you'd see on their face.
Were there any pupils?
I noticed, but I never saw any pupils. What color were they? They were almost brown black, very, very dark.
Were they all the same color in terms of the?
Oh, yes.
Did they have any kind of clothing on?
Yes, they had suits on. What did they look like? Very much toward like what we call suits. The only thing was, though, that I didn't see fabric.
Oh boy. All right, let's see if I can do this.
No, as a chemist, or even today, that I would recognize.
Were there any kind of fastener?
Buttons or zippers.
There.
No, I didn't see any.
What about their shoes?
Their shoes were all looked like they were connected. They were in one piece. And their hands, their limbs were covered. You know, right down to what
No, it's heavy. It needs grippy, or it needs another pair of pliers. I got it.
You mean the suit itself? Oh, it had like an insignia on it. What did the insignia? See, I'd have to draw it for you. It looks like not an artist, but it looks like something like this. I didn't know what it meant. The insignia was almost in the middle of the garment. It wasn't off on the side like we would expect it to be.
Did they need any special breathing apparatuses, or did they appear to be breathing on their
On their own, and it was one of the amazing things that we were startled about, where they could apparently survive in our atmosphere. And they had apparently come such a long way.
Let's see.
Did they seem to indicate that the atmosphere is similar to ours, their breathing?
They asked us about that. We asked them about it. Yes, they seemed to indicate
That should be removed.
Jeremy, can you hear us?
Claimed they had made tests.
Did they tell you anything about of their lifestyle was there?
We tried to find that out.
You can hear us? Okay, so we're just about ready to start. Try to get the both the camera view and also the live data so we can watch them both together.
Do look and learn and understand that this is a Faraday cage.
Yeah, okay, here we go.
I've known what a Faraday cage is. Okay, good.
Okay, can you watch the measurements on the other side? Let me see what's good.
Okay, we're powering it up with just magnetic spins.
Oh, that's right. Something's gone. I'm killing.
Okay, you guys should be able to hear us now. So basically, the motor just fried while we were spinning it up. I was having trouble controlling it with the remote because I was having a hard time getting the signal in there just to be able to control the darn thing. And it fried the motor. We have some more of them coming in. They're shipping all the way from China, and they've been in the mail for like 2 weeks already. So that's what's up with that. In other news, the power supply for Alzafon is officially complete. And yeah, this thing is fucking awesome. Check that out. There's actually some dials that are missing, but functionally it's working 100%. We were pulling 100 amps on the input, which means it was outputting about 12,000 watts of power at very high voltages. And yeah, that's the setup so far. So it still needs a couple dials in the front, but it is functional right now as is. Over here, Tom just built this really cool thing out of cardboard. Tom, you want to remove the cardboard cover and show us what we got going on underneath?
Big reveal.
This is the beginning stages, at least, of our warp drive detector. As you can see, we have the laser hooked up. It's all on custom-made, machined-out parts that we made on the CNC machine over here. We're waiting on a cube of glass that will arrive. That's the beam splitter. Going to shoot a beam that way, and that's how we're going to get our laser interferometry readings. There's going to be a big screen over here set up, and that's going to be our output. We had to build cover for it because the optics for such a device are very delicate. They need to be protected from anything. Basically, it needs to be in its own little clean room. Aiden Schaefer, what do you have going on over here?
Hi, aloha. What am I working on? Thermal. I'm playing around with ceramics. So I just was on a roller coaster ride. I've been earlier tonight. I've been working with some of the lab equipment to degauss a magnet, a ferrite magnet. We're trying to.
We had Schrodinger's.
Yeah, and I was sitting
ferrite
there, and Paul was there, and we're sitting there listening and watching the thing, and I hear this like pink.
Yeah, basically the problem, and Jeremy can probably talk about this too. He deals with ceramics.
Right, but I was like, this is like a slow climb, like a couple hours.
We're trying to get it to the
I've already
Curie
blown
temperature.
one, right, and it was over the thing. Anyway, I heard the pink, and
We're trying to get the ferrites over the Curie temperature, which is the point where they'll lose their magnetism. And the issue is that if you change it too fast, they break.
Right.
And
anyway, I just cracked the oven and it wasn't broken. So the pink was something else, but I was so I'm happy.
Oh my God.
So it's not broken. So that's
Schrodinger's
wave equation. I guess I'm a smart human. Anyway, blah blah blah. Artwork. Trying to give this away. Anyway, that lady on the SETI thing, she doesn't know squat from Jack, and Tom's my uncle, and crop circles. Like that lady needs. She went straight to like the two old guys saying, yeah, we do crop circles and tromp. But there's crop circles are real. Like the aliens come down, they use some sort of directed energy system, and it's like,
you know what a question I would have wanted to ask
15
them?
seconds and boom, and they lay down a pattern. Like,
yep, like that one.
See?
Let's do something like that.
Anyway.
I would have wanted to ask them what would happen to their funding if UFOs were real. Would they be out of a job if aliens were real?
Do you think
they would have to like storm the UN or something?
They'd be out of money because who would fund looking for airplanes? Like,
I don't know.
I'll spend $1 million in the next 4 years looking for airplanes.
Yes. Go pick up those SkyHub guys. That sucks that that fell apart. SETI, like in the Galileo thing, should be diverted to the SkyHub, and then you just
SkyHub is what, looking for asteroids?
No, it's there's a group of guys you live in Albuquerque and you make it your job to watch the sky, and within a month you'll see something glowing flying around the nuclear.
Well, we already know that they exist. Why don't we worry about near-Earth asteroids?
So
near-Earth asteroids are much more important for telescopes.
No, but that's not what SkyHub was about. They were trying to set up a small network, a mesh network of ground-based observatories for observing the sky, and they had like a fisheye lens. You'd need like broadband, be able to see in the UV spectrum, and then listen to water, or the ionization, the microwave of water, and then you just have a couple of them around out in public spaces. So SETI should pick up SkyHub, fund that.
What you got going on here?
You'd get it within like a month of the thing.
Well, what are these? What do they do?
Idaho. What
do these do?
Oh, these are jewel thieves.
Explain.
Bedini schoolgirl circuit.
What is this device supposed to do?
I'm not an expert on the Bedini motor.
Is it a free energy device?
No,
thermoelectric?
It's thermoelectric.
Thermoelectric means converting heat into energy.
Right. Like in this case, I see a quasi-crystalline structure, and we're playing around with tapping into the ambient electric field or the ether, bring back the ether.
So basically, you need to start with a demagnetized or degaussed ferrite magnet, which is what we were shooting for all day.
And I have one. The pink in the oven wasn't the chink of.
So now it is good. Okay. So how much longer until we can run this experiment?
I don't know, yo. I don't know.
Well, we have the necessary components for it. Now that the cooking oven over there, it's actually a dental oven. Curing oven worked correctly. So you're going to show us the smash one. This one was from earlier.
Ran up too high. This one I had let warm up so this is magnetic waste. I'm going to speak for a moment about Gaia. Like, this is magnetic waste now. Like, what the fuck do we do with it? anyway, it cracked. I ran it up. I preheated it for a couple hours and then ran it up to the Curie temperature, galloped in about an hour, and heard the little pink chink, and I had stress and strain. So there's a way of seeing stress and strain, but the pink chink started right in here. I got to find the plane of the camera. Rotate a little bit so I have some light. It's kind of cool if we had this under the microscope, Jeremy. I could show you the point where the stress started, and then it snapped in half, and then I got pissed. And anyway,
That's why there's so many beers missing, right?
Pretty much.
But the second one's a success. I think you left it like 6 hours or something like that.
Yeah, 2 hours.
Really slow rise time, really slow.
And then I got a good solid 45 minutes above the Curie, and then I heard the pink, the chink, and I was like, oh, so I had to roll a smoke and chill it out. And but lo and behold, it's not broken. I'm going in circles. Time is a circle.
Yeah. So that's kind of what's going on here at the Falcon Space Lab. Sorry there was no live experiments at the event. There was just too much going on. I was like, half an hour before going live, I'm at the store getting stuff for dinner. Like, yeah, there was no way we were going to get any live experiments going. So it was just a socializing event, but hopefully we're going to get all these live experiments happening throughout the week. We got the one in the Faraday cage out. We can analyze those results. They're right there on YouTube for posterity. And we're going to move on with the Alzaphon experiment, powering it up using this power supply, checking out the klystron, seeing how that works out, if it's working, or the brand new klystron, we can power that up too. There's no reason why it shouldn't work. And
a lot of time like prepping and cleaning equipment and getting things set up. We were still barely set up by the time we went live. It was like,
it wasn't just that the people were there to socialize. They weren't there to watch experiments, and there was so much stuff going on. I couldn't possibly be involved in it. Somebody had to take the mantle of any single experiment and made it happen himself, and that couldn't be me on that day. So that's pretty much what happened over here. But we got this guy came down. We got Tom Butler, of course, and this is Paul Johnson. He used to work for Caterpillar as a tell him what you used to do.
Oh, I used to fabricate mini hydraulic excavators and small truck type tractors for Caterpillar, doing mostly MIG welding and operating a 6-axis welding robot.
And what did you learn how to do today?
I learned how to TIG weld from a freaking YouTube video.
Wow.
And which is crazy because I spent like a year in welding school just to learn the other welding processes that I know. And I was able to learn TIG in 20 minutes.
There's a lot of similarities, though, aren't there?
Yeah, there is.
I believe such a.
Yeah.
Well, you did a great job at it, man.
Yeah, man.
Great job.
Yeah.
Great job. And we're going to be welding a couple components together for the laser interferometer table, which you've been helping out with. Yeah. He basically dropped out of that job and contacted Sony White and Miguel Cubier, and they told you to go back to college.
Right.
Which you realized was a waste of money.
Yeah.
And then you learned everything on your own, which is the way to go.
Yeah.
And now he's over here in warp drive school, working on warp drive detectors. Yeah, if anyone wants a free education in warp drive,
start charging like David Wilcox does, man.
Oh yeah, we should be charging. We should be charging admission.
Come work. Not enough people showed up. I was thinking way more people were going to show up at the conference, but we did have a good amount. It was still a cool showing. I didn't want too many people, but it was a good crowd. So, Mark, I don't know what happened to your feed. Still registering forces inside the Faraday cage. Very, very minute ones. No serious anti-gravity loss yet. Mark says his laptop died. So, guys, we are going to we're doing a lot of this out of our own love for the craft and stuff. So, thank you guys for watching, and feel free to thank you all for everyone who donated and contributed in the live chats today. And hey man, we haven't got anti-gravity yet or any kind of positive experiment, but at least we're trying and we're plugging along, and we're going through a lot of claimed experiments and trying out a lot of new ones, and hopefully someday we'll get there if we can do it optically. Make sure you smash that like button for me. It definitely helps me out in the description down there. And that's an Ibanez S series, my guitar. So yeah, maybe sometime we'll jam. It's been cool, and thank you guys for watching, and we'll be in touch.